Hello, and welcome to Positive Fandom. I'm your host, Rrr Mmmm, and today we're going to be continuing our series on the Wheel of Time TV series, starting with episodes 2 and 3. And today I'm joined with Stubble McShave. How are you today, Stubble?
Oh, I'm great as always.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. So we're continuing. This is our spoiler version. This one is a spoiler version, unlike yesterday's where we had a section that wasn't. This one is entirely spoiler, so we can just talk freely about different things that happened in episode 2 and 3. So episode 2 is called "The Shadows Waiting," and I love how this episode starts off, Stubble, because in the trailers we did see a figure like this, a yellow Aes Sedai, who seemed to be sort of tied up at a stake, and the fires were sort of burning at her feet. And you and I had speculated as to whether or not she would be able to sort of free herself. And unfortunately, we see that this poor Aes Sedai was not able to free herself, was she?
No, she had a bad fate.
Yes, she certainly did. And she was captured by Eamon Valda, and we're introduced to another very interesting group in this story called the Children of the Light. And
Yes.
before we get and talk about the Children of the Light and why this poor woman is tortured and killed, and you can kind of see her hands are even cut off, aren't they?
Yeah.
And so, clearly that was done so that I guess it would be more difficult for her to wield the one power. So the question that I have for you is, why is someone hunting Aes Sedai?
Uh, Children of the Light was formed. I don't know exactly when, but they were formed to rid the dark forces from the world and bring forth the light. And it started out as an organization that had very good motives and very good. They did very good things, but as always, things get corrupted and power corrupts, and their philosophy was changed as well. And the male Aes Sedai got mad and broke the world, and they say that the Children of the Light say that everyone who channels is like serving the dark forces, or to that extent. And so they see all channelers as evil, who has to be um, defeated and erased from the world. And then they also have they are the judge, jury, and executioner when it comes to finding people who, they have made up their mind if someone is serving the dark forces, and then they just have to justify to killing them. And so they are like a version of the Spanish Inquisition, the popularized version of the Spanish Inquisition, but they are very they don't have like a book to follow, a tenant to follow, except find the bad guys and destroy them by all means. And they often find perfectly innocent people that they think are, as they call, dark friends, serving friends of the dark. So sometimes they can lay waste to villages, or and if they find an Aes Sedai, then they have to bring her to their form of justice. And in the books, we never really see them. We just hear them doing uh, capturing Aes Sedai and so on. But they have to show things in the TV series to make it hit home, so to speak.
Well, this certainly made an impression on anyone who was watching it, especially with Eamon Valda, who, as you can see, this group is. I think it's wonderful that they call themselves Children of the Light, and they're dressed in white cloaks, and to imply that they are pure and are on the right side of things, so to speak. And yet, from what we see right from the get-go, is that their method of torture and whatever they choose to do is cruel. It's a cruel method, and it's intended to, as you said, weed out people who can wield the one power. And it's absolutely terrifying seeing that poor yellow Aes Sedai on the stake like that and having to die in this way. So it's certainly something that we have to look out for, and we do kind of see a situation that happens here, because in the next scene, Moraine and the party are still fleeing the servants of the dark. And essentially what happens is, as they're fleeing, and it just happens to be nighttime, they have to cross a river, but they need sort of like this river boat captain or person who has this device to go across the river in order to get them to safety. And the Trollocs are right on their heels.
Yes.
So they're running so quickly, and it's unfortunate. As they cross this river, the riverboat captain, Moraine informs him. She says, you can never go back to your village. And he says, no way. My son is on the other side. I can't just leave him like that. And unfortunately, he jumps in the water and tries to rescue the flotation device, but drowns. And at this point, the group of four are very upset with Moraine and Lan anyway. They're upset with everything that's happened, but the only person they can direct their apprehension and frustrations on are Moraine and Lan, aren't they? So what I found interesting about this is where Rand chooses to question Moraine again, so to speak, about, or maybe perhaps not at this very moment, but he is building up animosity towards Moraine, isn't he?
Yes, absolutely. And the reason for showing that, showing the ferryman dying in the swirling waters is to so that they later can have the discussion on her oaths and what they mean, because she can't actively kill someone with the power, but she constructed a scenario in the water with the whirlwind, with the whirlpool, and he killed himself more or less. She wasn't an active part; she was more of a passive part in that. And and Rand, he absolutely builds animosity, and we see that he is more or less the most stubborn of the Two Rivers folk when it comes to that, to have his own will and speak out, and I think he is a bit of a frustration for Moraine as it goes along.
And I suspect that Two Rivers folk don't speak out like this, do they?
No, they are in general stubborn people, but I think they take it as they come. As they survive the bitter winters and the strife in life, and but they don't speak out in the same way. I don't think.
Right. And during this episode, we do get it, or perhaps in the next episode, we get a sense that that the four of them have Two Rivers kind of written on their faces, and in the way they dress and the way that they act. It's clear that they are from a village that is a happy place, and other people can sense that about them, which I also think is very interesting. And as we mentioned before, you had said that that scene where the river thing goes down into the whirlpool, and inevitably the captain jumps in and kills himself, was meant to tell us about the three oaths. And at some point during this episode, Moraine and Egwene have a conversation. Moraine actually goes and gets Egwene, and she talks to her about essentially the one power and what the three oaths are and how important it is. And my question, and of course, I guess the question that a lot of people would be wondering is, will Egwene become an Aes Sedai?
Well, there's a lot of things that points to that direction, but who knows? We'll see when we'll get there.
Yes, and it is exciting to think about because Egwene seems to have, we already knew that she had the ability because she was, Nynaeve wanted to make her a wisdom in the village.
Yeah.
And we did see a scene with Nynaeve and Egwene listening to the wind, and they could hear something was off. So it was very interesting. Now, consequently, after Egwene speaks to Moraine, Rand has a dream where he throws up a bat. There's no other way to say it. He has this nightmare, because that's what I would call it, where he's, resting peacefully. Although perhaps they didn't really have a peaceful rest because they're under this pressure of fleeing away from, the Dark One. And he has this dream where he throws up a bat. And it turns out that everybody has these odd dreams. And when he wakes up, he sees a bat right in front of him. Um, what do you know about these types of dreams that they tend to have, and what was the dream indicating in your opinion?
The dream was, I go back to the books because that's my
Yes.
point of reference, and there's a lot of dreams and pretty long, drawn out dreams where there's this mysterious figure that tells them stuff and makes things happen that shows up in the real world. So this was a fast way to. This was the sped up version of that, so to speak. And we don't really see any bats in the books, but we see dead rats at an inn where they have a dream. And in the TV series, we'll get the sense that every one of these kids, they're grown, these 20-year-olds have these sort of dreams, but we only see it from one person's point of view at a time. But later on in I think it's the third episode, we see a dream from parents' point of view. But I guess we'll get to that later on.
Well, that was one of the first things that you told me when I first started to read the Eye of the Storm, was that a lot of the
Eye of the
story,
World.
sorry, Eye of the World, pardon me,
Yeah.
was when I first started to read the book, was that it would be from Rand's point of view.
Yes.
And, just to be aware of that. And, now I can clearly see, I could see it obviously, or when I was listening to the audiobooks, but, you can clearly see here that it is from his point of view. And there's even a part where I think Egwene wants to kind of be with him at night, just for comfort, because this is kind of a very trying and very confusing and stressful journey. And, Rand, I think, kind of out of spite says, well, I came out here to be by myself, and I thought that was very foolish in a way, because this really isn't a journey you want to take on your own, is it? I mean, you need each other for support, right?
Yes, and I think Rand is still feeling the hurt from Egwene choosing the style of the lifestyle of wisdom instead of a life with him, and he's acting out in that way. And I think that's also maybe the reason why he's so antagonistic to Moraine at times, because he's frustrated, and even if they aged up the character, he still have some teen angst around those things.
Yes, and now here's another let's say one power user, or in this case an Aes Sedai, who is also wanting Egwene to kind of stay away from Rand and focus more on using the one power. So, first he'd seen that in the case with Nynaeve towards Egwene, when she wanted when Nynaeve wanted Egwene to be a wisdom. And now we're seeing an maybe even more powerful one power user, Moraine, who thinks that she could go even further and become an Aes Sedai. So Rand is really kind of, feeling quite insecure. He already had been rejected by Egwene, I guess, more or less.
Yeah.
And now that they're on this perilous journey where he really could, I guess, maybe feels that they should be sticking together and just forget about some of the other stuff that's happening. He doesn't feel like he has a place in this. And I can understand why, because, I think there's a part where he says, well, Egwene has a future, she's got a future at the where we're going, but what kind of future do we have? Like, what is this going to mean for the rest of us? But I think it's very interesting that he is asking that question. It's okay to ask that question, but
Yeah.
he doesn't realize that obviously one of the four of them is he hasn't fully accepted that one of the four of them is going to be the dragon. I think that's what it is. He's accepted that Egwene will probably go on and, let's say, has a future in wielding the one power, but perhaps he hasn't accepted the fact that he may also have a future.
Yeah, I think it's that he doesn't know what his future is. Earlier, he was certain that he was going to build his own house and raise his own family and have, the traditional farmer's life, and that was his path in life. But now, what's he going to do? And if Egwene isn't with him, who is he going to be with? And he's just, he doesn't. I think he's just frustrated because he doesn't know what's next for him.
Yes. And so then we see the party. It's leaving now, and they're heading towards, they're heading east, as Moiraine has explained to them, to the White Tower, where there are other sisters, other Aes Sedai, who are going to be able to help them. And of course, on the way on this path, soon after, they encounter the Children of the Light. And this of course is very scary because as we said before in the beginning of the episode, we encountered a camp of the Children of the Light, and we saw that of course there's an Aes Sedai, a yellow Aes Sedai, who was being burned at the stake. And so Moiraine very quickly and very skillfully says, do not mention the Aes Sedai, do not mention the White Tower, don't mention any of this stuff. Only speak when spoken to. And she takes off her ring and gives it to Lan. Do you know anything about this ring that she's wearing, Stubble?
It's just the Aes Sedai ring, and it identifies her as an Aes Sedai. So she doesn't want to be identified as an Aes Sedai because she knows what the Children of the Light will do. We saw it in the opening, in the cold opening to the episode, and so that's her reason. And we also get some, I don't know if you picked up on this, but we get some of Moraine's backstory here, because she can't lie. She must tell the truth, even if she obfuscates it at times. But she says that they should refer to her as a lady of a fallen house. So, and she can't lie. So she is a lady of a fallen house of some kind. We don't know in what way it's fallen. We don't know where it started and where it fell to. If it's just a normal noble woman who's had hard times, or if it's something else. We don't know. But we also get an example of her not lying but obfuscating the truth, with saying that when she says that she was attacked and injured, and the reason that it was a troll that injured her, then they ask where did you come from, and then she just say the last village they visited, not where she was injured. So she doesn't lie, but she obfuscates, and you don't always hear what they say.
Right. And, clearly she is not disclosing if she's an Aes Sedai because they have not asked her that. And
Exactly.
so, there's no reason for her to say that. You can't tell by looking at her. And she does sort of look like a lady from a fall. She certainly does look like a lady, the way that she's dressed and the way that she holds herself. You can almost tell that, she comes perhaps from a background where, maybe she did come from a great house at one time. And so there's certainly no doubt of that, traveling with a companion, and then maybe, these traveling with a guard, by land, as in land, and then some other, ladies and gentlemen in waiting, who are the young four of them who are traveling behind her. And that's not so unusual, for a group or a party to be traveling in this way. So, what I also found very interesting is that we also learn that within the Children of the Light, there's another group, or a separate group, called the Hand of the Light, the Hand of the Light. And this is the group that I guess does sort of interrogation, as we saw with Eamon Valda. It is Eamon Valda who we see the second time, right, Stubble?
Yeah, he's a questioner, and he's, the interrogators, and pulling out toenails and burning witches at the stake, and the whole shebang. Whilst the other gentleman, who was, I think it's Bornhold, he's the if you read or listened to the book, and he's the older gentleman in the gentleman, but older guy in of the white cloak. So and he is more of a military figure rather than if you do if you would do a World War II Nazi reference, it would be that Eman Valda is the Gestapo, and he's the general military kind of thing.
Right, exactly. And, we do see that there's a division in that group, but both of them have their unique ways of dealing with, one power users, anybody who can wield the power. And, obviously they're a dangerous bunch. And so, Moraine, I have a feeling, has encountered them before with Lan, and she's known how to behave and what to say and what not to say. And I think that it was a good example for the four of them, because where they live or where they come from, they disclose everything, don't they, Stubble?
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned earlier that he couldn't see that she was an Aes Sedai. In the books, you can see, because there's a physical alteration. They get what they call an ageless look, that people recognize. But in the show, they don't have that, because it would cost too much money to do all the CG effects and so on. I don't remember what you asked me right now.
No, this is perfect. That's very interesting that it was an effect that wasn't carried over. And of course, they would have to change the storyline just a bit if you could automatically recognize her as a Aes Sedai.
Yeah.
And so I think that, this story, which has so many elements to it, they did the best that they could for this part. And I think it does put the point across very clearly. Like for me, the start of this episode, it was very clear of all, many of the dangers that they were going to be encountering along the way. And I really like that. I like to see that sense of, or let's say the power of that group of the White Cloaks. They do wield a certain amount of power. And, I think it was demonstrated here very clearly. So after they get through the White Cloaks and they're on their way, Moraine tells the story of the army of Manetheren. And this was one of the stories that I liked a lot about, although she goes into a certain amount of detail. In the book, I think it had a little bit more detail for obvious reasons. But it was very interesting because she's using this as a rallying cry to explain to them why they need to continue to fight against the Dark One, and anyone who follows the Dark One. And I think that she is sort of giving them a story of something that happened, and they need to hear this so they can understand the risks that are involved. Now, what's also very interesting is that we learn that Perrin is injured by Trollocs, and he's haunted by visions of wolves. Now, is there a particular reason why Perrin is not telling anyone, let's say in this in the TV series, that he has been injured by a Trolloc?
I think it's because he's beating himself up about what he did in the fighting. He doesn't want relief. He wants to feel the pain because he's feeling guilty for what he did, and so I think he could ask for help, but I don't think he wants to suffer. If he say it like that,
Okay.
I think that's what they're going for in the TV series, that he wants to suffer for what he did, and so he won't ask for help.
And it's very interesting because at the same time, when Moraine and the party encounter the Children of the Light, or the White Cloaks, we learn that Moraine has a serious injury, doesn't she, from the Trollocs? And because of this injury, she becomes incredibly weak, and they're forced, let's say, or they're one of their only alternatives, or let's say their best alternative, or the lesser of two evils, is to and from the television story, it seems like Lan is making this decision because Moraine is so weak now.
Yeah.
Their Lan decides to go into the Shadowed City. What do you know about the Shadowed City?
Oh, how much do you want to know? No, but it was a city that how to make this brief, but in order to fight during the Trolloc Wars, in order to fight the Dark Forces, they decided to be even worse than the than the bad guys. So and they the city was more or less consumed by its own evil and malevolence. So it's a different kind of evil than the Dark Forces represent. So if the Trollocs would have gone into the city, they would have fallen prey just as easily as the others from this. I don't know if they'll name it in the TV series, but it's called Mashadar, and it's actually a kind of a mist in the books. But here they've depicted it as a like a black crawling mass almost, and I don't think I should go into the history of the place because that will take a lot of time.
But earlier in the series, Moraine and Lan are talking about what their options are and where they can stay, and it's very clear that Moraine wants to avoid this place.
Yeah.
She doesn't want to go anywhere near this. And something that I really liked, and maybe you could elaborate more about this, because I didn't speak to you about this in detail in the first episode review, but in the second episode, and maybe you can answer this question, Tom hears voices calling to him, and he finds or is led to a special.
Do you mean Matt?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Matt, I'm messing this up, Stubble.
No worries, no worries.
Matt finds a special weapon, and it's a dagger with a red gemstone in the hilt.
Yeah.
And he was it's very odd because just a few moments before he finds this dagger and gets this calling, he was talking to Perrin about how, I think it's Liliana, would make sure he always had a knife to protect himself when needed. So my question to you is, it looks very similar. I could be wrong, but it looks very similar to a weapon that Rand's father used. Is it a similar weapon, or is this a completely different weapon?
Do you mean the sword that
Yes.
his father? No, his father used a normal weapon that was created in a magical way, but it doesn't have any magical properties other than being a very durable sword. What Matt picks up, and Lan warns him before that don't pick up anything and don't eat anything that's from here, and the whole thing. And that's because everything that's in the city is cursed and tainted. And when he picks it up, he wakes up this what do we call it, malevolence in the city.
Right. And it's very interesting that's the case. Now, the group gets compromised because the horses run off.
Yeah.
And they're separated by this entity, as you already mentioned, in this Shadow City. And as you said, they showed it as sort of like a dark, creeping entity that kind of shrouds through the entire city, as if it wasn't already dark in there already. So they all flee. The four of them flee the city, thank God. And Moraine and Lan end up riding into the forest. I guess Lan still had his horse and was able to kind of get her out of there. But Moraine is in really bad shape. And when she realizes that they were in the Shadowed City, she's really upset with Lan. However, what makes this the ending of this episode even more interesting is while Lan is taking care of Moraine, we suddenly see somebody pull a knife on Lan's neck, and it turns out to be Nynaeve.
Yeah. So she's back.
Yes, she is back, and you know we're it's a nice transition into episode 3, which is called A Place of Safety. And is episode 3 the one that you said was your favorite so far?
Yes, because of the character development and because we focus on individual characters in another way. Um, so the third episode is my favorite episode.
Yeah, it is a very good episode, isn't it? And so it's called A Place of Safety, and of course it's alluding to the fact that they're looking for some place to be, and perhaps a place of safety lies beyond the horizon. Nynaeve finds herself being pretty much in the beginning of episode 3, so we can get a context. The last time we saw Nynaeve was when she was being carried away by Trollocs um, in the Two Rivers at the Beltane Festival.
Yeah.
And it looked like she was definitely doomed. And we can actually see, you know, somewhat a bit of a beaten Nynaeve kind of lassoed on a rope, and the Trollocs are dragging her to do whatever they will, I guess, to feed on her or to just kill her. But Nynaeve is alive, and she does something incredible. She manages to see the Trollocs fighting one another. They're fighting with one anher, and she kills a Trolloc. What did you think about this scene with Nynaeve?
Yeah. First of all, the scene with the two Trollocs, that's very telling about how Trollocs value each other. They're not best friends. They're whenever someone is, you know, whenever they can get a meal, they get a meal. And no, because if we go back to the books, it's there's not this action moment. There's that Nynaeve meets up with them later on, and after having stared down the village council and said that they're a bunch of idiots and so on. But here's it's a much more um,
Quicker
action-driven
reunion.
thing. Yeah, here's much more action-driven, and I find it believable. Like she more or less ambushes him and takes him down. And I don't know if you saw the blood pool floating up. It's a theme in these, at least in these first episodes. I've heard people say that, oh, it's a comma, but no, it's it's a dragon's fang. It's the uh, that's a yin yang like type of symbol, and
Yes.
the white part is the female half of the one power, and the black half is the male part, which is tainted now. And so they see um, the society, when they see something evil, they draw a dragon's fang on a door or something, you know, because these are bad people. And but we see the slaughtered lambs in the first episode are laid out in this pattern, and also the blood pool is the blood in the pool formed the same shape. So it's a lot of imagery that some people recognize, and I like the Nynaeve's opening scene here.
She was quite powerful and unrelenting. She concentrated, like the level of concentration that she had.
Yeah,
Especially when she found herself in that pool of water, you know, as you kind of we were talking about, where she just knew, I guess maybe she was even observing the Trollocs as they were dragging her, and kind of saw what their behavior was like. And, you know, having that advantage of knowing how your enemy behaves, you know, gives you an advantage to defeating them. So I thought that it was very skilled, and, you know, she's incredible. So you know, she just is just one. It was one of the most, I was very happy to see that she got away alive.
yeah.
So
When I read the books the first time, the first 3 or 4, 5 books, I didn't like Nynaeve, but she became my favorite character as the series progressed later on.
oh, that is very interesting. And so you know, of course, Nynaeve is here with Moraine and Lan, and she's questioning them. You know, where are my friends? Where is everyone? And, you know, and I'm not doing this necessarily in exact order because it does jump from Nynaeve, Lan, and Moraine to Matt and Rand, and then Egwene and Perrin back and forth. So I'm not going to say everything necessarily in order, but we learn, that Nynaeve is in a position to help Moraine. Now, is there any reason why Nynaeve would be reluctant to help Moraine heal, since Moraine cannot heal herself from that wound that she had from the Trolloc earlier?
Yeah, can you repeat that? I missed something there, I think.
Sure. Is there any reason why Nynaeve would be reluctant to help Moraine heal her wound? In other words, help Moraine by healing her wound.
Yeah.
Is there any reason why Nynaeve would have a reservation of helping Moraine recover from an injury?
Right. They didn't hit it off in the beginning. Moraine questioned her authority by not acknowledging her when she first revealed herself to the Two Rivers folk. And Nynaeve also see her as a bit of competition when it comes to the authority figure and the whole thing. And she can hold a grudge. And there's another reason as well, but I won't go into that because of spoilers.
Okay. Okay.
But she's reluctant to help her because she didn't like her from the beginning. It's only gotten worse from there.
Exactly. And so what's very interesting about this is that we do get a chance to see where the party of four have ended up. It turns out that Egwene and Perrin have paired up together, and they are separated from Mat and Rand. And we get this very interesting scene where we see Egwene kind of wield the one power to make fire. And we've talked about this. This is another example of seeing, everyone wield the power. And Perrin makes a joke about, well, can you create food and water? And so my question to you is, can they create food and water using the one power?
No, they unfortunately not. They at least not as far as I know. But the scene with Egwene and Perrin, I think that a lot of book fans really missed the Elias character, the old, tracker kind of guy who lived in the forest. But he was all about exposition, and in a TV series, you can't really have that much exposition in the same way. So I certainly miss the character, but I understand why they didn't include him, because they have to introduce a new character who's with them for a relatively short time, and there are already so many characters in this series, so I understand why. And was there something I missed there? There was something about Egwene and the power, right?
Well, yes, you did answer that about how I wanted to know whether they could use it to sort of like conjure food, because we did see some other uses of the power. For example, it seemed like Moraine was taking power away from herself for the horses.
Yeah.
And and Lan kind of chastises her and says, well, you know something, you also need rest. You also need to go ahead and recover, and you're not 100% well. But
Yeah.
Moraine is putting everyone else before herself, and which I guess maybe it's difficult to be the only one power, the wielder of the power, when she probably does need a lot of help to protect everyone from all these different directions that threats are coming from.
Yeah.
So
And but could I just
yes, yes.
because the Aes Sedai, they take in the one power, and then they split it up into different kind of flows and weave a type of pattern that has an effect, right? Very very
Yes.
simplified. And but that takes energy. It's not like it just passes through them. It takes energy to channel something. So she's using her own energy. She's getting more and more tired, and so on. And when it comes to finding food and water, you could find water in the ground and bring it up, possibly, but you can't create food, but you can find water.
Interesting. So, and of course, Egwene probably is unaware of this because it's not something that she's ever done before. And I think it's very interesting too, because, maybe we'll see her do it in the future, if she does decide to go down that route. So, incidentally, as as Matt and Rand are fleeing in one direction, and I'm not even quite sure what direction they are going in, we see Perrin and Egwene encounter a pack of wolves that seem to be at bay or stop when Perrin is around. What did you think about that?
Well, that's as always, I refer to the books because that's my frame of reference. But in the books, we're more introduced to the wolves and almost get the individual characters, so to speak. But here, it's their way of introducing it, and maybe I would have liked something more cinematic, exciting, perhaps, than what they did. But I understand that they're limited in what they can tell in a TV series, because almost everything in the books in that sequence is internal monologue, and you can't really. It's very difficult to show that on screen. So I understand why they did what they did, but I maybe they could have done the wolf thing a little differently. I don't know, but I liked it, but I think there were potential for something else there.
Did the wolves lead Perrin and Egwene to find the travelers?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? What do you think?
I think that they had some influence over the direction they were going, and especially when it comes to being in a place where you don't know where you are, and if there's a threat, you're going to run in the opposite direction.
Yeah,
And those travelers are, let's just say, they indicate that people have called them untrustworthy, and
yeah,
I think there's a bit of irony to it, in the sense that it almost they almost seem harmless, but
yeah,
they are warned that people call us different things. And
yeah,
so, this is some of the naivete of Egwene and Perrin, and
yeah,
just in their desperation, they almost have to, be around the fire with whomever would offer them shelter.
yeah.
But, they truly are in danger. And we see a very interesting encounter, maybe even more interesting encounter, in the sense, for Matt and Rand, don't we?
Yeah, yes, and if I just can go back to Perrin and Egwene for just a moment,
Yes, of course.
I think that the events in episode 1 with Perrin and what happened to him and his wife, I think he will be more tempted to stay with the traveling people than what he was in the books. I think it will be. I don't know. Should we give any spoilers for episode 4 or the future here about the
This is a
Tinkers? I don't
spoiler
know.
review. You can spoil all you
Okay.
want.
If you don't want to hear this, block your ears for 20 seconds. But the Tinkers, they follow the way of the leaf. They are extreme pacifists, and I don't think Perry wants to have anything to do with violence for a good bit because of what he did. So I think he will be very tempted to stay with them, but we'll see. We'll see.
Interesting. And I could see that as well, because I don't see him returning to anywhere like near the village or anything like that, because of the traumatic experience he had with his wife. And as you said, he feels responsible for that. But that injury on his leg still has not healed, a Stubble. And I'm
No.
curious as to how that's going to affect him, let's say, from moving on. Maybe it won't ever heal. I mean, we've heard of situations like that where people get injuries and they just don't heal, those injuries. They just don't ever close up or whatever. And so when when Rand and Matt finally find themselves near any kind of village, they get, sort of an ominous warning as soon as they step towards it. And that's
Yeah.
a person who's hanging in a cage. Now, I thought, by looking at this person in the cage, that the thing that was hanging from their waist was a ring of an Aes Sedai. Am I incorrect on that, Stubble?
No, it was some kind of brooch or something like that. It was I didn't I don't think it was a ring. It was some other kind of jewelry, and yeah,
Yes, and what's also very interesting about it is that it makes an impression on them, and perhaps, and I don't know if this is true, perhaps this is the first time that Matt and Rand have ever seen anybody in a cage rotting to death. I mean, do you think it
yeah.
is?
But yes, I think it is because they've grown up in a very safe environment, so to speak, and it's also the first time that they see in Aiel the, the culture from which this person comes from, and I can't wait until we're introduced to them later on.
Yes, and they end up in this mining town that isn't friendly. It's not a friendly mining town, and clearly Matt and Rand stick out like a sore thumb, don't they? I mean, you can tell that they are not from this area at all, with the smiles on their faces and perhaps the scowls on everybody else's face. But we
Yeah.
finally encounter one of the most important characters in the story, the Gleaman.
Yes, he was in the books. He was introduced in what's it, chapter 3 or 4? I don't remember right
Yeah,
now, but
I think it's
ve-
four. Yeah.
yeah, very early. And but we don't see him here until in this little mining town.
And of course, the Gleeman is there chatting away with them. And, he, at some point, of course, he's going to sing and tell them a story of a man who can't forget. And, I do have to ask you if, you and I have spoken about how, first of all, the Gleeman is so much more vocal in the books, of course, and with so many more stories. And he sings this story, and I do like this actor who plays the Gleeman. I think he does a great job.
Yeah.
And also, the other thing I was going to say is, what was he singing about?
Oh, it's a little bit obscure, but it seems to be about the previous dragon who lived 3,000 years earlier, and he is singing about he can't forget the terrible deeds he did to his family and friends. Uh, that's what I take from it, at least.
Right. And I thought that was a very good foreshadowing or a storytelling way of this kind of ominous song. It wasn't a cheerful song.
No.
It was, like almost like a warning song. And I think that, Matt and Rand must have been very intrigued by this song, something in a tone perhaps they've never heard before. But ironically, after the Gleeman sings, and of course it's assumed that he probably sings the whole night through. We only see one song,
Yeah.
but perhaps he entertains them for a day or two. And somehow he lifts the pouch or the purse, uh, that Matt had. And because Matt truly is just has never been around a bunch of folks like this, so that he's very easily taken advantage of,
Yeah.
kind of, and also wearing his heart on his sleeve. Um, so, Matt and Rand approached the barmaid, and they said, look, we need a place to stay. Can we work for food and lodging, more or less? And she says, I have something for you. And of course, here's the wood chopping scene. And of course, you've
Yeah.
told me about how you enjoyed the wood chopping scene
Yeah,
in the
it's
books.
a bit different here, but it's in the books. You get a sense of what type, steadfast, honest, and hardworking, and we get that here as well. And in the wood chopping scene, you see a bit of Matt's character. In the first book, you don't really get much of Matt because we have everything from Rand's point of view, more or less. But here we get a little bit of Matt from the later books where do you think she's up for it? He's he likes the serving girls and the barmaids, and tries to, every chance he gets, he tries to find a companion, so to speak.
Well, I loved how Rand says, I thought Moraine was more your type.
Yeah,
And,
because
I
she's
thought,
older.
Yeah, I guess he likes older women or whatever it is, but I thought that was really cute because, of course, it's kind of a light conversation to kind of talk about how maybe they can have a hookup or something in
Yeah,
with all of the dourness that's going on around them. Wouldn't it be nice
yeah,
to kind of like have this casual encounter, that could be quite pleasurable. So I think that it also shows that they try to find the light or they try to find the pleasure in things wherever
yeah,
they may go. And that might be like a foreshadowing about their personalities even when things are at their darkest, they might be able to see some kind of hope, even in such a desperate moment. So because after all, they're stranded, they have no food, they have no money, they don't have a place to stay, but they're thinking about that. So it's very funny in a sense. And
yeah.
so
And Matt is my favorite character in this episode.
I'm sorry, who's your favorite character?
Matt is my favorite character in this episode.
Oh, interesting. Um, and so, interestingly enough, um, it is also at this moment that Matt kind of tells Rand to seize the day because Egwene just doesn't really love him or care about him.
Right.
And, they've all they have no secrets amongst one another. So they all know how Egwene has kind of been rejecting Rand. And this is maybe one of the worst times for Rand to hear something like this.
Yeah.
But I guess for a realist, anybody watching this would say, I'm sure she cares about him, but there are other things that they all have to take care of. But it is clear that she rejected him, and it's unfortunate, but Rand is not having any of this. He doesn't
No.
care. Right as of right now, in Rand's heart, she seems to be the person that he is in love with and cares for. So I think that Matt, probably knows this, but perhaps he did that to nudge Rand along to kind of like say, don't miss out on a good opportunity if one comes towards you, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
And
and
I don't think Egwene rejected him. I think she shows something else. So I don't know if it's the same thing, but she didn't reject him. She shows something else rather than him.
interesting, interesting.
If you get the difference.
I think I do. Um, so after Nynaeve very kindly does everything she can to try and treat Moraine's very serious wound, Lan feels comfortable enough to kind of leave her with Moraine, and he says, I've got to go. He has to scout out. I mean, his whole thing is to protect the party, and he has to find out what's going on because he's kind of been with Moraine and hasn't really been able to sort of act upon the way that he might normally go ahead and figure out what's going on. And so he decides to leave Moraine with Nynaeve. So my question to you is, could Nynaeve really protect Moraine? Is she capable of doing that?
That depends on what's in store for them. If there's something that's not to, I mean, from normal stuff, but if a bunch of Trollocs would arrive, she wouldn't be able to protect her in the same way that Lan could, for example. But Lan have to go and try to find. I think he's trying to find other Aes Sedai to heal Moraine. That's what it's after. But I don't think that. I mean, if a small animal would attack them or something, Nynaeve could fight it off. But if there were a bunch of malevolent people or monsters or whatever, I don't think. I don't think she would be able. Not in the same way that Lan could, at least.
Right. And so, what's also kind of interesting is that Lan does go out and scout and comes back, and I'm kind of jumping ahead. Before Lan comes back, let me just say this. We already mentioned that Egwene and Perrin come across travelers, and I did also want to ask you this question before I go on to what happens with Rand and Matt. Do you think Egwene and Perrin would have been welcomed by the travelers if they knew that they were being pursued by the Dark One?
Yes, I think so, because they don't reject anyone, and they follow the way of the leaf, which means that to take what comes and face it, and if it's your time, then it's your time, and you will fall like a leaf, but you never do any harm. There are some Wheel of Time creators who have taken the name Way of the Leaf, but they have more of an what you call a smoking herb reference to Way of the Leaf than what these guys have. But that's just a side thing. But no, they wouldn't refuse anyone. They are very welcoming, which is why some villages don't like them, because they run off with their young ones who find their way of life appealing, and so they get a reputation of stealing children and other stuff. But no, they wouldn't reject them even if they were hunted by something evil.
Interesting. Now, ironically, we find that Matt and Rand, just when they feel like they're settling in, let's say for the night, Rand finds out that the barmaid who is giving them work for food and lodging, I think her name is Dana. It turns out that she is someone who has pledged herself to the Dark One.
Yeah.
And perhaps maybe that whole village has, and she's there to capture him. And she says that she is so excited that she's the person who gets to bring him to, is it Ishmael?
Yeah, Ishmael.
And that's when we realize how dangerous she actually is, and she kind of locks Rand in this in this room, and she's going to kill him or do whatever she wants to do to him. And he breaks out, runs for his life, comes across Matt, and explains to Matt, we have to flee. But even when they're fleeing, she kind of like puts them in a corner, or blocks them into a corner. And the person who saves them is the Gleaman.
Yeah. And that's something that we skipped over that I think we should mention, that when Matt goes out to the cage to get the jewelry or whatever, that because he's out of money, then you get a shot that's I found very interesting, and that's when we see the Gleaman, we see his leg and his arm, and a dagger comes into his hand. I don't know if you remember that.
I'm sorry, what can you explain that again, Stubble?
Yeah. When Matt has approached the cage,
yes,
we see a person go into the side of the frame. We see his leg and we see his arm and his hand, and then there's a dagger that he slips into his hand. I don't know if you remember that.
Yes, you mean the Gleaman slips a dagger into his hand, because the Gleaman truly doesn't know what Matt's intentions are.
Yeah, and when you see the dagger slip into his hand, you hear a few guitar strings, and it's very evocative of a gunslinger scene,
like a Western.
If you had exchanged him from Clint Eastwood and readying his revolver, it would have played exactly the same.
That is very interesting, and of course, the part you're talking about is the same unfortunate figure that we saw in that cage who's passed away. Matt is approaching the figure, and is it because Matt wants to sort of like pillage the corpse?
Yes, he is out of money, and at least what he says his motivation is to get back home, but I'm not sure that's his motivation, but who knows. But when he sees an opportunity, he's not going to use it to the dead person. So he sees an opportunity, and then we get some information about the Aiel, that Tom says that they veil their faces before they kill people, and so you get a little bit of world building here as well for upcoming seasons as well.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and as I said, after the Gleaman tells Matt that if you're going to pillage a corpse, the least you can do is bury it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like hiding your tracks too. Where did it go? We can't find it. If he just left it there and pulled stuff off of it, it seems like you're desecrating a corpse.
Yeah,
which
and
I guess
also just respect for the dead, and the whole thing.
Absolutely. But the
Yeah.
Gleaman clearly is a character in the story who knows his way around the block, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's been around. He's been around. I think they are going to portray him almost like an a 50-year-old, 60-year-old type Clint Eastwood person who plays the guitar, and instead of a gunslinger, he's a knife thrower. And I think they'll go that route instead of the book route, where he's more of a storyteller, more of a, even if he can fight a good fight as well. But I think they will go more towards the action end of the spectrum.
And I'm excited to see that. And when the Gleeman saves them, Matt had made a point of saying that Dana, the barmaid, had his knife or sword, and he was
Yeah.
very concerned about the fact that she had it. And of course, she met a dark fate, of course,
Yeah.
even with the sword, because the Gleeman saved them. But I wonder how that particular weapon is going to have an influence over Matt, who really is just kind of, I see him sort of as a happy-go-lucky figure. But with something like that weapon, it could, kind of take him in a path that he may not wish to go. So he manages
No.
to get it from Dana as she's killed by the Gleeman. And the Gleeman says, look, we got to get out of here. You can go on your own, but we got to get out of here. And Rand says, where are you heading? And he says, east. So, I'm sure, the Gleeman isn't a fool. He knows where they're probably heading and what's going on, including about the Aes Sedai and the tower. And in one of the last scenes of the episode, we see Lan come back and he says, I found what I'm looking for. And we see Moraine riding on the horse with Lan, along with Nynaeve, and they encounter the lady from the beginning of the episode, whose name I can't remember, but she's also a Sedai.
Yeah,
And
Leandrin.
Liandrine Sedai.
Yeah.
And she says, well, hello, Moraine Sedai.
Yeah.
This was very, very interesting. I don't even know if I have this. I wrote it down, but I don't have it in front of me, but I could verbally describe it because I watched it.
Yeah.
She tells Moraine and Lan and Nynaeve, who obviously knows what's going on at this point because she's filled in the blanks. Nynaeve is not a fool.
No.
She tells Lorraine Sedai tells Nynaeve, I'm sorry, Leandre Sedai tells Nynaeve and the party of three that we came across a man who claims to be the dragon.
Yeah.
And we've captured him. And I can't remember the name of the character.
It's Logain.
Logain, right. And the last scene that you see in the episode is sort of Logain peering out from the cage, looking at you, like say the viewer, with a very intense look on his face. Because
he does not look defeated.
No, he doesn't. He's in a cage, but clearly that cage is just, for show for him. Because I have a feeling that it'd be very hard to kind of trap this person and keep him under control. And so we know that there's even more trouble out there, more intriguing characters and more intriguing encounters. And the party of four is separated from Moraine. This is very interesting, what may happen in episode 4. But I have to say, I can see why episode 3 was your favorite. There's certainly a lot of things that go on. And I was really happy with it. And I'm really excited to see what's going to happen in episode 4.
Yeah, episode 4 will probably, I think Logain will be featured quite heavily in episode 4. And the difference between episode 2 and episode 3 is that in episode 2, things happen to the group, while in episode 3, things happen to individuals. And so we got a more focused view of each character.
Yes. And, I think that if the series continues in this way where we do get more detail, like you said, it could be very interesting, even though there are things that are missing that were important. I'm hoping that it'll continue in a positive direction and we see more of what we love about the Wheel of Time series, Stubble.
Yeah, I think it started out a bit rough in the first episode, but I think episode 2 was a clear improvement, and I think episode 3 was improvement on episode 2. So I hope it continues in that trajectory. We'll see. Maybe it will crash and burn at the end, but we'll see.
Well, thank you, Stubble, for joining me for this episode 2 and 3 spoiler review of the Wheel of Time TV series. And everyone who is listening, we're going to continue the series on about the Wheel of Time TV series, reviewing the episodes, talking about all the things we love about the episodes and things that we hope we see in the future ones. I hope you join us. And thank you so much for watching this episode. And everybody, please remember, be kind.